Live. Okay, here we go. Here's our first live Substack Live. This is Rolf Kvalvik from Waves and Positions. Hopefully, this will be the first of many, but we're trying this thing out. This is supposedly going live is the new thing that everybody wants. So right now we're just testing out some settings here. And I'm going to go ahead and go through the article published today, which was actually an article I published about a year ago, and I've updated it. So let me just go through my Substack. I had a really good friend who told me about Substack, and I've learned since joining Substack that random people on the street don't know what it is. So it's much harder to get someone from outside the ecosystem to get involved versus just, talking to people who are already figured it out and already love getting their news and information through Substack. So there's different layers of engagement. But so today I sent out an updated version of something I published about a year ago called "The Untold Truth of 2008: How a European Dollar Crisis Broke the Global System and What You Can Do About It Now." So, how a Cold War accounting trick froze world banking, forced a secret Fed rescue, and left the planet permanently short of dollars. Now, everything we were told about the great financial crisis was wrong. And until we understand why we never bounced back, we'll keep repeating the same mistakes. All right. So, this article is mostly about how 2008, we think it was like greedy Wall Street bankers or some other scapegoat, but it was really European banks that caused the financial crisis. So, we're going to go through step by step what happened. The title of this is, or the title image has a picture that says, "It was Lehman. It wasn't Lehman, it was Deutsch. The Untold Truth of 2008: How a European Dollar Crisis Broke the Global System and What You Can Do About It Now." The Eurodollar system that broke the global recovery. The United States fixed its banks in 2008. Then it spent the next decade going nowhere. The reason was never on Wall Street. Here we go. Part one: The recovery that never came. On paper, 2008 had a happy ending. The banks got bailed out, the market clawed back, housing found a floor. So, why did the decade that followed feel like walking through wet cement? Wages stalled, rates sat at zero for years, productivity sagged while inequality widened. QE2, QE3, QE4, and still the engine refused to catch. Here is the part almost nobody says out loud. What broke in 2008 was never inside the American banks, it was inside the money itself. All right, part two: the spark was American. You were sold a clean story: greedy lenders, subprime loans, reckless buyers. All true and all just the match. The fuel sat across the Atlantic. And shoot, I should just talk about this picture here right now. This is a AI generated picture of our president and our fearless leader of electric cars. And they got this golden dome here. And so a lot of the stuff that's going on in the news recently that most people don't know about, I'm trying to inform, has to do with how this golden dome is connected to the Iran war. Your 401k is going to get affected by it. Uh, so stay tuned or check out my Substack feeds. So this is it's all connected. I even have it's super cliche, but I have a JFK assassination series, which is based off all the things released last year because we did get new information last year. And it was totally new to me when I researched it. I feel like certain conspiracy theories like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness monster are fake. Other conspiracy theories like the JFK assassination, there's some hidden truth, and hopefully this you can check out at my Substack I have an 8-part series explaining that, but everything's connected here. Everything's connected, and I think that's kind of my biggest thing is the connections. The British English science class system is always creating these boxes of separation, and atoms are separate and everything's separate. But in reality, everything is connected. Everything is connected, and it's thinking of things in separation is you're going to miss the full picture when you don't realize that everything's connected. So, anyways, I just want to talk about this picture. I got a little crazy there, but I am going to go ahead and move on to part two here of the what caused the financial crisis. And this is where it'll probably be something you've never heard of before because I'd never heard of it. All right. So we know that the spark was from America, but what was the fire that it started? So in the years before the crash, European mega banks had become the beating heart of a vast offshore dollar machine. Deutsche Bank, UBS, BNP Paribas, and RBS, they borrowed dollars they did not have in a market the Fed did not control to buy American mortgage debt by the trillions. When it froze, the first banks to choke were not in New York. They were in Frankfurt, London, and Zurich. All right, we're going to step back and see how these euro dollars, where they come from. All right, so part three here, the Soviet accident behind it. The strangest part is where it started. In the 1950s, at the coldest edge of the Cold War, Moscow held a pile of US dollars and a real fear that Washington might freeze them. So the Soviets did something clever. They parked those dollars in Europe beyond American reach. One of the banks they used sat in Paris and carried the telex address Eurobank. The dollars stacking up offshore took their name from that cable line. Eurodollars. A defensive move. So it was a defensive move by a communist state that quietly seeded the largest and least regulated dollar market in history. Nobody designed it. It simply grew. Okay, here we go. Part four, dollars nobody ever printed. So what is a dollar? What is a euro dollar, really? This whole thing is about euro dollars. This is what caused the 2008 collapse. Okay. You were told it was Wall Street bankers. It was the euro dollar. So what is a euro dollar, really? It is a US dollar held outside the United States. And here is the trick. Most of them were never printed by anyone. They are credit. IOUs denominated in dollars, stacked on top of other IOUs, pledged as collateral to create still more. A bank in London could buy American mortgage bonds without a single paper dollar ever moving. It was all book entries. The whole tower rested on one fragile bet that someone would always agree to roll the funding over. The system ran on trust, not cash. All right, part five, the loop that killed it. The machine had a fault line built into its core. The banks borrowed short, often overnight, and lent long into 30-year mortgages. That works beautifully until the music stops. The loans underneath were shaky to begin with. No income, no job, no assets, and a teaser rate that was always going to reset. When American homeowners started defaulting, the mortgage bonds lost value. Lenders panicked and refused to roll the overnight loans. To raise cash, banks dumped bonds into a market that suddenly had no buyers. Fire sale prices dragged the bonds lower. Lower prices triggered more panic. More panic froze more funding. Even AAA rated paper collapsed, not because the math was wrong, but because trust and liquidity vanished in the same breath. Result, a banking system that was solvent on paper and out of cash in reality. Kind of like our oil markets, where the price of oil is low, but the reserves are running out. And that's what's cool about this live thing is I can give a little extra commentary. And if you like my shirt I'm wearing, this is actually the Rocinante is the name of the ship on one of my favorite shows. called The Expanse, which if you have Prime, it's free on Prime, and it's one of the best shows, and it kinda cuts through this whole DEI kind of woke stuff that's really not true. W What they're saying when they say that they're saying it's a bad show. When it's a good show, nobody cares. So the main thing about diversity is it doesn't matter who the lead actors are, what race they are, what they believe in. It just has to be a good show. This is the perfect example. The Expanse has probably the most diverse cast of any show. Nobody talks about that it's diverse. Nobody cares. It's just like one of the best shows ever made. So nobody even mentions what the race is or the gender or whatever. Just it doesn't matter. So whenever somebody says something about in that vein, it's just because the show was terrible. It was produced terribly, the directors were bad, the the writing was bad. It really has nothing to do with, I mean, after watching Disney Star Wars, I'll never blame actors again because some of my favorite actors look so bad in those shows that you finally put it together that it's not the actor's fault when the writing and the directing and the producing are subpar. Um, so again, we're looking at connections here. You got to connect all the dots. All right. Sorry, went off on a little tangent there. So here we go. The bailout you never heard about. The bailout you never heard about. So this is what would probably have caused riots in the street, but didn't, I guess, because nobody knew about it. Here is where the real story hides. European banks owed dollars they could not produce. Their European Central Bank had no power to print them, only the Fed could. So the Fed did quietly, very quietly. Through emergency currency swap lines, it pushed dollars to foreign central banks who funneled them to their own failing giants. The lending ran into the trillions, dwarfing the TARP headlines that filled the evening news. So you remember the 787 billion bailout of the banks and AIG and all that stuff. The Fed gave European banks trillions of dollars, like over $10 trillion. Like people would just freak out if they actually knew how much we gave these foreign banks. The famous bailout was theater. The real rescue was a dollar lifeline thrown across an ocean, and almost no one ever heard about it. They kept the lights on. The Fed ended the panic without ever fixing the problem. This is the biggest thing is we gave them a bunch of money and nothing changed, so we're still at risk. It pumped trillions through quantitative easing. It pinned rates to the floor. It bought time. But it could not do what it could not do was rebuild trust inside a money system that runs on infinite refinancing. Oh my god. Okay. Sorry, I'm working on my public speaking skills here. I'm going to start this section over. So this is section 7. They kept the lights on. The Fed ended the panic without ever fixing the problem. It pumped trillions through quantitative easing. It pinned rates to the floor. It bought time. What it could not do was rebuild trust inside a money system that runs on infinite refinancing. So the machine survived in a kind of half-life. Zombie banks, zombie growth, a recovery that everyone could feel was hollow and no one could quite explain. Now, section 8. The things you should go Google. There is a name for what 2008 made permanent. The central bank swap line. Things you should go Google. The central bank swap line. What began as an emergency, of course, it always starts with an emergency, then becomes permanent. Okay, what began as an emergency hack is now standing infrastructure. The Federal Reserve has effectively become lender of last resort, not only for America, but for the entire dollarized world. Economists call the deeper condition the global dollar shortage, the chronic offshore hunger for a currency only one nation can create. Search those two terms. The last 15 years stop looking like bad luck. They start looking like the predictable behavior of a system no one runs. So, I don't know if this was intended that the US was just going to become the central bank for all banks, if that was a power play on our part or what, but or if that was just the result of this problem. Okay, here we go. Number 9, your edge. Okay, I like to tell a story and then let's figure out how it can make your life better. Once you see the dollar as a credit machine, you can watch it. Funding stress shows up early in places most people never look. Swap line usage, the cross currency basis, the quiet cost of borrowing dollars offshore. So do three things. Stop waiting for a fix that is not coming. Hold productive assets over paper promises. Learn to read liquidity because that is where the next freeze announces itself first. When the world runs on money that no one prints and everyone owes, the crisis is never really over. It is only waiting for the next refusal to roll the funding over. All right, so that is your quick lesson on the Eurodollar. I recommend everyone do their own research. Don't just accept when anyone tells you or what you hear. I really recommend you do your own research, and it's good to get different perspectives from different people. Here's a fun little plug on my products that I can offer you. If you have an idea for an article or want me to write something for you, I'm available to work for you. If something in mainstream media does not sit right, or you cannot quite make sense of it, let my fresh eyes break it down in a way that finally clicks. And if your company needs an outside perspective to find the systemic problems and efficiency gaps that insiders are too close to use, that is my expertise. I see the connections others miss. So yes, I think that my superpower. So if you go to my pinned article in my Substack, I talk about how everyone has a superpower. Yours could be accounting. Yours could be organizing. Yours could be sprinting. Every person has a superpower to something that for some reason you're the best at or you're really good at it. And so it's one of the best advices I ever got in a meeting was this guy was talking about the superpower. You really got to figure out what your superpower is and then stop wasting time on the stuff that's not your superpower. So the things that frustrate you, the things that are really hard to do for you, that's someone else's superpower. So you go find them and they're the ones who solve your problem. So for me, I know that what I'm good at is quality control and seeing the connections and effects those connections have on the whole system. And so I've identified that, and then I have other people that I know who are amazing at art, at accounting, at organizing, at setting agendas and things. Those people are amazing, and those people you have to utilize their resources. So, anyways, I'm Rolf from Waves and Positions, and I hope you enjoyed. This is my very first going live. And so hopefully it's not the last. And I look forward to having guests and talking to people, interacting. And wow, it looks like it looks like two people joined. Amazing. So what's going to happen here is after this broadcast ends, it's Substack's really cool. It's going to push it into a podcast form where I'll share the podcasts where you can listen to it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on YouTube. So Substack's made this really easy where you can talk about your content and then they crunch it down and put it in all these little places where you can distribute it after. So, I wanna thank everybody for joining. It looks like 2 people joined, amazing. And I will send out next time I can send out an email to everyone to let them know I'm going live, and I'll try to make a regular schedule where I talk about different things, and I will see you all on the next one.